Terrarium, see, that invisible, transparent vapor canopy of waters above the firmament, provided even surface temperature, even in the polar regions, and therefore there were no convection currents and no wind. See, and that's what we read in Genesis. There was no rain on the earth. Just geysers came up and springs of water here and there, but no rain ever. It was humid, see, and warm. And that's what Hebrews 11:7 means when it says, Noah, by faith, Noah being warned of things not seen as yet. No one had ever seen a raindrop fall from the sky or a snowflake. And so, friends, when the great flood came, the vapor canopy collapsed and all the heat trapped in the polar regions escaped. Now we know there were great forests that grew in Antarctica. I mean, we found huge coal seams down there in the South Pole. And all kinds of tropical things that lived up in the Arctic zones of the world. And what happened to them? The Apostle Peter said it, remember? The world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished, transformed through the catastrophism of the flood. All in 1 year. 1 year. 361 days of global catastrophe. Okay? Now, one of the amazing effects of the flood that I myself am still trying to understand, it's very complicated, very amazing. A great weather scientist named Michael Ord has discovered, friends, that when the flood ended, the oceans were so warm. I mean, they were warm before the flood and got even warmer during the flood with tremendous what? The fountains of the great deep breaking up and great, heat, superheated steam and magma. Okay? That it created enormous precipitation in the form of snow in the higher latitudes, and the Ice Age began. I mean, Greenland today still has 10,000 feet of ice. Okay? And so does Antarctica. 10,000 feet deep. Well, when the flood ended, the whole northern part of Russia, Siberia, and Alaska, and Yukon of Canada were just overwhelmed with masses of snow that became glaciers, see, that crept down over Europe and North America. And then what happened? These animals proliferated all over that part of the world because, believe it or not, it was still relatively warm because of the ocean, see, the warmth of the ocean. So that while there was much snow in many parts of that part of the world, it was warm enough for these animals, huge ones like mammoths and giant sloths and bears and so forth, to proliferate by the millions. Then the Ice Age ended catastrophically. Why? There came to be a terminal point at which moment the oceans cooled down sufficiently, you see, for the precipitation to end, for the dust and gases in the atmosphere caused by the spewing out, you see, of that material from volcanoes everywhere had settled down. And there was a tremendous temperature inversion, hurricane force winds, whipping up the dust that suffocated, buried and froze millions of animals. All the mammoths vanished like that. See? And other huge animals that once roamed this part of the world, in the north part of North America and of Europe and Asia. And Michael Ord, the author of this book, has written several volumes. Here's one, the most recent one, Frozen in Time. The Woolly Mammoth, the Ice Age, and the Bible. So I say, well, Lord, I'm amazed at all these things. How can I go and see this myself? It's very difficult to get to northern Siberia, trust me. Or even northern Alaska. But you don't have to. You can just go to where? The Grand Canyon of Arizona. And oh, what do you see there, friends? A crack in the crust of the earth 5,000 feet deep, 25,000 feet across. And here you see it. Look, layer upon layer, like pages of a book, over 500,000 square miles. So when you stand at 5 million people a year go there from all over the world. How many have never been to the Grand Canyon? You must make immediate plans to rush to the edge of the canyon and look down. But I have a word of warning. Be careful. You mean I might stumble and fall over? Yes, but if you know Jesus, there's no ultimate problem. You'll soon be with Him. I'm talking about a bigger problem. You could fall into the clutches of an evolution-oriented national park guide who wiped God out of the scenery totally. And he'll say, ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the great wonders of the world. And it took 1 billion years for this canyon to form. Ever heard things like that? Remember the magic wand? Ladies and gentlemen, 1 billion years ago there was no canyon here at all. Just a vast geosyncline. See? 500,000 square miles. Just like this. And hundreds of rivers must have poured sediments into this vast basin. See? Pouring sediments like batter in a huge pancake pan. And then it sank down and 1 million years went by and more rivers poured more sediments and then they sank and another. After 500 million years, you have 5,000 feet of superimposed layers. And then, ladies and gentlemen, a river appeared and cut all the way down through the canyon to the bottom. And that took 500 million more years. And here we are. Impossible. Look, friends, you can't have a geosyncline that big on this planet. But even if you could, you couldn't have hundreds of rivers pouring sediments across it without forming deltas around it. But even if you could, you couldn't lift, tilt, expose, erode those layers and then have them all flattened out again for the next layer. You're asking for miracles. All evolutionists believe in miracles. All the time. See, without a God to do them. Please pray for evolutionists. They need help. And then, friends, no river could cut through hardened rock 5,000 feet down with steep canyon walls. The best a huge river could do is to form a vast alluvial plain like the Mississippi and a huge delta at the bottom in the Gulf of Mexico. You say, wow, how did the canyon form then? The whole thing happened in less than 2 years. Do you detect a slight difference of approach? 2 years? Yes, look, the layers are all still horizontal, like layers of a birthday cake or pages of a book. And therefore, the top one had to be formed so quickly after the bottom one that they're all still horizontal to each other. And that could only happen if sediment saturated waters on a global scale swept over the world and dumped the load. And before it could be tilted or eroded, here comes another mass of water with its load of sediment dumped on top of the first one. And then comes another day after day, week after week, month after month, and the whole year of a global catastrophe of water. And then as the continents went up, remember Psalm 104, as the mountains and continents went up, at this point it cracked open and the water gouged its way through soft, unconsolidated mud layers as it rushed to newly deepened ocean basins. And that maybe took a few more months and it's all done. You say, well, that's unbelievable. Well, we all used to have a problem thinking about that until God said, in effect, may I give you a visual aid? What's this? Mount St. Helens in the state of Washington. Anybody heard of Mount St. Helens? Oh, friends, we'll never recover from this one. The greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. Here's this beautiful volcano nearly 10,000 feet high in the state of Washington. And people knew something bad was about to happen. It began to vibrate, see? And the whole front end, now listen to this, the north side of this mountain began to bulge hundreds of feet out, which means get out of here. Something serious is going to happen. Nobody had the faintest idea of what was going to happen. When that thing exploded, friends, 20,000 atomic bombs equivalent power released. It filled the atmosphere with the day became night all across the state of Washington, Idaho, Montana, see, and covered the whole world, okay, for months. And that mass of mud that was pushed out of the north slope, see, created a heat wave 500 degrees Fahrenheit that went 300 miles an hour. I mean, there were 65 people miles away watching this, and they perished. It's like that. Millions of trees smashed.